So for the short mix baguette, the recipe that you guys have in your recipes, it is a straight method, which means we're gonna put everything together and mix it for the amount of time that the recipe calls for. And it does says that it's a short mix, which means that we only need 600 revolutions per minute, which in all cases, if you refer to your KitchenAid little table that I gave you, then we can figure that out. That one will ferment for 3 hours, doing a fold in between each hour. So it's gonna have 3 folds, 1 each hour. So that one, I'm gonna start off tomorrow morning. And that's why it's so important that you guys read your recipes, really read your recipes, because you're gonna find out whether you have to start doing the mixing process a day ahead, or if you can actually accomplish the bread start to finish within the same day, which in all cases, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna take from one day to another if you really want to develop a lot of flavor. All right, so that one will mess with tomorrow morning, but the other one, it's an improved mixed dough. Still a straight method, but it's an improved, and it does has a pre-ferment. The other one does not contain a pre-ferment, it's just straight method, but this one, it's a not a straight, but so the other one, it's actually an improved mix, that it's gonna have a pre-ferment, so it's gonna follow the pre-ferment mixing method, which means, again, we're first gonna mix a pre-ferment and then we're gonna go to the final dough. Now this one requires a pouliche that it has to ferment from 12 to 16 hours. That means overnight, right? So if I want to make the bread tomorrow, Monday, that means I have to mix my pouliche today, all right? So that's why I'm starting to film today. All right, and I'll give you also this recipe, but what I'm gonna do right now, the only thing I'm gonna do is basically just mix that pouliche so we can be set for tomorrow, okay? So quick reminder, a pouliche is a wet pre-ferment that it's typically almost all the time equal parts flour and water, sometimes containing a little amount of yeast, or it can go without the yeast. This one, in this case, it does, and I'm doing such a small amount, a very small part of the recipe. I think I divided the recipe in a tenth. I'm doing a tenth of the recipe, so the amount of yeast is like 0.6 grams, which in all cases I'm just gonna throw a very small pinch to it. But let's get to it. It's a very small pouliche, but I'm still using a fairly wide container because you have to remember this is going to be fermenting overnight, room temperature, so it's going to grow a whole bunch. So you do want to use a container that it's not going to spill out, right? So for this amount, we are going to mix 159 grams of flour, bread flour, all right? 159 grams. Hopefully this is enough. 133. Let me go for more. Precision, right? All right. 150, 53. Fair enough. 159 grams of flour. Now it calls for 159 grams of water, that it is specifically says that it has to be at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Why? Let's remember that one thing that you have control over in your bread making, it's controlling the temperature of your water, all right? So if it calls for you to use water at a certain amount of temperature, you better follow that, right? Because if you use water that is colder than that, your pouliche is gonna be very, the activity of it's gonna be very slow. So it's gonna take a little bit more time to do what it's supposed to do and to develop all that flavor and that fermentation. And if you use water that it's hotter than that, it's going to be very, very active. So it just depends on the amount of hours you want to leave your pouliche fermenting overnight, or the amount of hours. Like, let's say if you're only doing 12 hours, then you better do that 75. If you're going for 16 hours, you can probably do 70, and maybe it's gonna be okay. But in this case, I'm probably only gonna leave it 12 hours, so I'm gonna go exactly with that 75. Now, if you grab cold water, tap water, it typically comes out, even if you feel like touch it and feel it cool, it's gonna be about 80. So I did have to add some ice cubes to my water. Disregard the Wendy's cup, sorry. But just to show you, what is that? 64, 63. All right, so it's too cold, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of warm water. Be right back, I'm back. 75, all right? All right, so we're gonna add the same amount, which is 159 grams. All right. All right, 159 grams of flour and 159 grams of 75-degree water. And as far as the yeast, it's calling for I think it's 0.6 grams, which in all cases, I'm just gonna throw a little pinch in there. All right, very little. Remember, this is gonna be fermenting overnight for 12 to 16 hours. And then we're just gonna use my hands, really. I know chefs that just use their gloves, but this is such a small amount that it's okay. Of course, larger amounts. Can you mix pouliche in a mixer? Yeah, especially if you're doing very large amounts. Now you really want to mix it until, of course, it's gonna look lumpy, but what you don't want to see is big lumps of dry flour. You just want to make sure that all the flour is hydrated. And again, this looks like very little in this container, but tomorrow it's gonna grow probably up to here, so you just want to keep an eye on it. I'm actually gonna put it in a tray, that way if it, for any reason, it spills out, I don't make a mess in my kitchen. And this is instant yeast, by the way. All right, so that is my pouliche for my improved mixed baguettes. I'm just gonna clean my hands. That is really all we're gonna do today. Again, this is gonna ferment 12 to 16 hours, and then tomorrow we'll do the final dough, and we'll start mixing the short mix, which is gonna also ferment for 3 hours. This one is gonna ferment for 4 hours with 2 folds. So I'll see you tomorrow. I almost go off. You need to cover this. If you don't cover your pouliche, it's gonna develop a skin, and that's no bueno. All right, so I do not have a cover for this bowl, but I'm just gonna cover with a plastic bag, make sure that it doesn't get dry at the top. All right, another great idea and suggestion is just mark or have a paper where you note the time that this was mixed. That way you know that it's once it's ready to use. All right, so Sunday and it's 8:30 p.m. All right, 12 hours, meaning starting from 8:30 a.m. I'm gonna be able to mix the final dough. Real quick, guys, update on my sourdoughs that were started on the 12th. It's going good. It's going good. Sometimes they're more active than other days. Right now they're just very slow, but the smell, it already switched to something a little bit more sweet. Doesn't have a great, it's still liquidy. It doesn't have a lot of structure to it, but you can tell by the smell it's very, very different. So it's time to feed them. I'm gonna feed them, and like I showed you in the last video, I'm gonna leave them, I'm planning to use some of this for the baguettes that I'm gonna mix, so I'm gonna put them in the oven with the light on. right? Betty and James.